Today we have Dr. Joe Pascal. He's a extension livestock specialist in District 9, 10, 11, and 12 here for us. His specialty is beef cattle breeding and genetics and ranch resource management. Uh, he's going to talk about managing for stocker calves in our presentation. Dr. Pascal had a prior engagement on November 5th for our meeting, but he was gracious enough to provide us with a recording on stocker calves. And Joe, I'd like to tell you that we've heard a lot from beef cattle cow-calf operators saying that they have plenty of grass from, due to the rains from Hurricane Hannah and beyond, and they want to utilize that grass and hold on to some calves until next spring, hoping for higher prices. If you could educate us on some of the management practices that would ensure the calves are weaned correctly and present it well when they sell next spring, we'd appreciate that.
Good deal, Vidal. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, I want to thank Vidal and the guys and agents down in the Rio Grande Valley for inviting me to come talk and also to allow me to give this presentation a little bit early. We're going to talk about some generalities, not a whole bunch about specifics. We'll talk about some specific vaccines and things such as that, but we're basically going to talk about what it takes to hold on to your calves, your wean calves as stocker cattle and sell them later at maybe a later age and hopefully a heavier weight through the auction barn, or maybe even feed them yourself. There we go. So it takes a minute for teams to sort of catch up with the next button. So this is just a set of calves that perhaps any one of us could be weaning in the pens, maybe, sort of a mixed lot, but typically out of the same bull or same types of bulls, different types of cows. And Vidal's wanted me to talk about if you save your own calves. So really we're going to talk mainly about native calves. So those are calves that we raise ourselves and we're going to keep. Maybe we've got more grass and maybe we buy a few more calves. Maybe some of those calves are our neighbors' calves. They'd still be native to the United States, native to Texas. But an opportunity that if you have lots of grass and you don't want to keep your own calves, you can buy calves. You can buy calves from Mexico through a broker. And so, that we won't talk about how that's done, but that is an option. Steers versus heifers. So if I'm going to keep calves that I've weaned, I'm going to make sure that all my male calves are castrated, that I'm only going to keep steer calves because they bring more value. Steers bring more value at any weight than bulls, but especially after we've added 100 or 150 pounds to them, the discount for intact bulls gets to be pretty severe. Steers will gain faster than heifers. And so that's something to think about. Some of us will keep some of our heifers back anyway for replacements, but so steers will tend to grow a little bit faster. Heifers tend to get a little bit fatter. But so those are some things to consider. There's a whole host of value determining factors we'll talk about in a minute. Sometimes you might want to sell some of your better calves right away because the price for them. Maybe keep some of your plainer or more common calves back and use those to utilize that extra grass. And then, of course, you need to think about things like muscling and frame and health of those cattle. And the health aspect, as I said, what we want to do is we want to wean those calves, giving them opportunity to get the ball out for them to quit hollering for their mama, to dry out, to get some vaccine in them. We'll talk about those vaccines, but the ones that we're talking about primarily is to make sure that all these calves have a blackleg shot or a blackleg complex, the 7-way, and that they're boosted. All right, so one shot, and then 4 to 8 weeks later, they get their second shot according to the label. I'd also like to see these calves get a 4-way respiratory vaccine. So a 4-way respiratory includes IBR, infectious bovine rhinotracheitis, BRD, bovine respiratory disease. BRD is BVD, bovine viral disease, PI3, parainfluenza type 3, and BRSV, bovine respiratory syncytial virus. And you can buy that product in a killed product or modified live. I'd recommend that since you're going to keep them around next to your pregnant cows, that we use a killed product and again get 2 doses in them as soon as possible after weaning. And then, of course, you may want to deworm them, all right, and take care of external parasites at the same time. And on the steer calves, I'd certainly implant them. So we'll talk about some of those things. Where these cattle come from, we're going to talk about maybe keeping your own cattle, but you could also buy cattle from other people, from a livestock commission company, and you could basically add to, so maybe you have enough grass for 20 or 200, and maybe you only have 10 or 150. So you might want to add to your group. And there's some additional considerations that we'll visit about. So this is my place in northern Jim Wells County, and this is a buffalo grass pasture at one time. Actually, it was a coastal Bermuda grass pasture at one time. And then a succession of droughts turned it into a buffalo grass pasture. And then there's also a good sprinkling of KR blue stem and some native grasses and even some weeds. And so these are some steers from Mexico that were brought in. So it should sort of change your idea about what a Mexican steer looks like. These cattle had a lot of European and British influence in them, a lot of Angus, as you can see, and some Charolais, and even some Hereford and Simmental, but they also had a little bit of ear. But if your calves look like your previous slide or like these calves, they certainly can be put on grass and get some gain out of them for maybe about a pound a day in terms of gain of grass like this. If you have decided to put in winter pasture or have irrigated pastures, you might get 1.5 pounds or 1.75 pounds a day gain out of those kinds of pastures. Here's another set of steers that are sort of close up, also from Mexico, also on my place, and you can see this was actually on some coastal Bermuda grass before that drought hit. And you see it's sort of a mix. These are a little bit rough shaped coming out of winter. So they were wintered on a grass like this, but these cattle gained right at about 1.25 pounds during the winter time on grass. That's pretty darn good, but again, it's sort of in northern Jim Wells County, and we never suffered a really hard freeze. So here's some Brangus females that we kept one year, and again on the same pasture, the same place. This was, you can see that there's actually a tub over here. I travel quite a bit in my job. And so I will put out a tub or two every now and then. I have to realize that those tubs are expensive. They're upwards of around $90 for 225 pounds. And so I sort of put it out there because I know that sometimes I'm not going to get to see these cattle every day or every other day or even every third day. And but I have to pencil that in. I have to decide, is it worth the cost? Because these heifers right here will eat about 1 pound of that a day. And so in terms of supplement costs, that's 40 cents or so. But I also know that it's going to add about 28 hundredths of a pound, almost 3/10 of a pound of protein. And when they have to eat some pretty low quality forage that you see back out here in the pasture, we can actually improve their gain quite a bit. So these heifers, if you'll note, they all have a tag in their ear. They've all been branded, and they all have been vaccinated for bangs. And so this is a little bit different set of cattle. I'm going to go back one than these steers right here. So these steers are all going to go into a feed yard. And in fact, what these cattle were sent to my place, and I was paid on the gain of these cattle. So somebody else that owned the cattle actually took care of the medicine bill and took care of the mineral. My responsibility was to make sure that the cattle had water, okay, and had plenty of groceries, and to report to the owner if any of them got sick so they could come out and be treated. And then, of course, I also had to maintain the fences. So those cattle were going to the feed yard. These heifers, on the other hand, these were mostly straight bred heifers, straight bred Brangus. They weren't registered, so they were going to go into a breeding herd, and so the care of them was just a little bit different. I want you to notice that back here in the corner behind the tub, this is sort of a makeshift trough, I didn't supplement these heifers a great deal. I didn't supplement any of these stockers a great deal. Mainly, I supplemented them to sort of to gentle them down so they would come to me so I could look at the cattle. I tried to look at these cattle. This was about a group of about 60 heifers. Those steers, there was about 75. You need to look at them individually 2 or 3 times a week, check for problems, look for any issues in the cattle. So if they're your cattle, you're going to do that anyway. So this is another set. This is actually up near Cuero. This is not mine. These were just some Brayford females that were purchased, and these are a little bit older. So these are yearlings. So most of the time what we're talking about is weanling calves, calves that are 6, 7, 8 months of age. We've weaned them off their mama. We've either bought them, we've kept our own, we purchased them from an auction barn, whatever. But they're a lot younger in age, whereas these were close to like 12, 14 months of age. And so they're a little bit different. They're a little bit more rugged. They don't require as much attention. But so there's all different sorts of stocker programs. I don't have a picture, but not very far from me in northern Jim Wells County, there was a rancher that basically ran a lot of what we would call stocker cows. So these were older cows, shelly cows. That's a term for thin cows. And they would buy them at the auction barn. They would bring those cows over, put them on winter pasture, and fill them up, put some condition on them, put some bulls out with them. And those cows that were bred at the end of the season, they would go into a calf production. Those cows that were not bred, that were open, they would go to beef processing as cows. They would be heavier cows. They would be worth more per pound, slightly worth more per pound than a thin cow. But where they actually made most of their money is that those cows were heavier. And so there was more pounds of weight that to be sold, and also a slightly higher price. So some of these value determining factors are here. And as I said, we're talking about keeping these cattle for ourselves, from ourselves. We're not talking about going out and buying a truckload of cattle from someplace. But if you are, here's some things to think about. Backgrounding means how well have these cattle been prepared? And so these are your cattle. You're going to prepare them well, okay? You're going to make sure that they have the vaccines we talked about, blackleg and 4-way respiratory, plus dewormer, plus implant in the steers. Right, so you're going to make sure that they're well prepared. But other things that may cause, if you buy cattle, the color of the animal, the fill, okay, whether or not it's got a full belly, whether it's carrying a lot of water, whether or not it has horns. Maybe you have a personal preference. So a lot of people like black cattle, or they like red white-faced cattle, or they like tiger stripe cattle, whatever it happens to be. It can be of value. We talked about vaccinations already. We talked about breed in terms of personal preference. Condition and flesh. You know, I like to see my calves at about a body condition score 4 or 5, very similar. And I'm going to slip back a couple. Okay. I want to see calves that sort of look like what you see right here. All right. They're not fleshy. Okay. They actually look a little bit of thin, but they're hungry and they're lean, and they're going to come out on that pasture, and they're going to start eating, and they're going to gain. So these heifers are okay. This heifer that you see right here in front, she's a little too fleshy, but if you look at the heifers that are behind her, okay, they have that sort of that same look as we see in those steers in the earlier slide. Frame, I don't want to see really small frame cattle, but medium to large frame. So those are cattle that would be ready to be harvested 1,100 pounds and up, because I want some growth. I want some frame. There's not anything paid for altitude in cattle, so the distance from the ground to the belly has no value. But on the other hand, we do know that cattle that of a breed or a type, they're a little bit framier, tend to gain a little bit better. And I like to see muscling in these cattle. I don't want them to look like dairy cattle. I want them to have some muscling, because muscle is what pushes the scales down. We've already talked a little bit about weight. Sex, or gender, steers versus heifers. I want to talk a little bit about weight. Everybody knows that lighter cattle bring more per pound than heavier cattle do. That's called a market slide. And right now in livestock marketing, what's going on, particularly in beef cattle prices, is that the amount of money that's being paid for a fed steer okay, versus a feeder steer versus a wean calf is narrowing considerably, maybe within about 30 cents per pound. And so there's not a lot of money to be made in buying a lot of really light cattle and trying to turn them into heavier weight cattle unless you can do it with a amount of cost of gain. And that's because of this market slide has gotten really, really small. One year when I gave this talk, the calves were bringing almost $3 a pound. Okay, y'all remember that several years ago, 2014. And of course, fat cattle were bringing $1.20, $1.30. There was a huge amount of money to be made from $3 to $1.30. Today, not so much. We talked about frame score just a minute ago, and basically what we're looking for is some cattle that are not really short in terms of stature. We're looking for medium and large frame cattle because we want them to grow. And this is a slide from the USDA. This is actually, if you read market reports, and I'll show you one in a minute, they talk about large and medium or large and medium and small. And they talk about steers and heifers. And so this is the target weight for a large steer, 1,250 pounds. A target weight for a medium frame steer is between 11 and 1,250. And for a small frame steer would be less than that. The heifers are about 100 pounds back because females tend to be lighter weight than males do. Heifers tend to also be fatter, okay, and don't gain as fast and are not as efficient because they reach puberty. But just keep that in mind. So we tend to pay more for steers and heifers, or value steers more than heifers. We tend to have more value attached to large and medium than we do for small. And I think that the fellows in the valley have been doing a long time feeder calf study, looking at auction barn receipts, and this will bear that out. So this is just an old slide from USDA. This slide's probably 50 years old, but it just goes, the point is that just because they're black, that doesn't mean that make them the smallest. And just because they're white, that doesn't make them the tallest, okay? This is a muscle score thickness. And so if you read a market report, in addition to large, medium, and small, you'll see a muscling score. So this is a 1, and essentially a 1 is a very thick steer, very much like a show steer. To be quite honest, in South Texas, we don't have a lot of 1s. Most of our cattle are number 2s, okay? Or perhaps even number 3s. Most of the cattle, I would say 80% of our cattle in South Texas are number 2s. About 10% are here, and we have about 10% here. We almost don't have any 4s. So this would be thin, this is thick, or this is slightly thick, thick, slightly thick, slightly thin, and thin. And so if you look at that, what we're trying to do is we want to try to look for cattle that are mostly 2s, maybe a few 1s, maybe a few 3s, because remember, they have muscle, and muscle is what pushes the scales down. Excuse me. So this is just an example. So you see a 3 over here on the side. This is a 2 in the middle and a 1 over here. Doesn't make any difference what breed they are. It's about muscling score. So let's talk a little bit about quality. So this is actually from an old slide that I borrowed. They don't scan very well, but here we've got 2 steers, and you can see the difference. So this is a pretty nice type E1, 1.5 type of steer that you see right here. And this is sort of like a number 2.5. So lots of times order buyers use a different scoring system than the USDA frame score and muscle score. And they use a score that goes 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and just basically denotes quality. And so this calf didn't have as much sheath that you see right here. He'd probably be a 1. But because he's got a little sheath and a little ear, he's more like about a 1.5. This calf just lacks muscling. You can see the difference in muscling here. So he's a lower quality calf. He's like a number 2 or maybe a 2.5. You know, they have about the same amount of Bos Indicus or Brahman influence, but you can see the steer on the right has much more marbling than the steer on the left. And you can see that also too in these heifers. These heifers, little difference in terms of breed type, but over here on the left-hand side, we have really sort of like a number 1 kind of heifer. All right, and over here we have like a number 2, 2.5 kind of heifer. So I'll get less gain out of this heifer. I'll get less gain out of this steer, but he's liable to be cheaper as a result. And that's the thing that you have to think about is what's the value of these animals going in? Because I have to think about all my costs, all right, and what I'm going to get for him going out. And then here's some black females that can, and believe it or not, the female over here on the right would have a little bit higher value than the female on the left, even if they were identical for every other reason except color. That's because this heifer is a crossbred, and so they know that because of heterosis or hybrid vigor, she's going to do a little bit better. She may not get sick. She's going to grow a little bit faster. She's going to be healthier. This heifer's got some other problems. She's a lot lighter muscled, all right, even if they were the same frame size, and they appear to be, just differences in picture size. You know, she doesn't have as much muscle, as much depth of body as the heifer on the other. One thing that you have to worry about if you're thinking about keeping your heifers back, even if you castrate your steers, depending on how long you keep heifers on grass in your at your place, they will come into estrus at some point, and so there is always the potential that they can be bred by your bull or by a local bull that jumps the fence as they start coming into estrus, and so that's something to consider when we think about keeping heifers. So you have to think about what your grazeable forage is. How much forage do you have? This is where NRCS has a really good tool, the web soil survey page that can actually help you draw a map of your branch and determine what the grazeable acres are and tell you in a good year, and I would say that this is a good year for y'all, okay, how many pounds of forage can be produced per acre. So typically a cow's going to eat about 9,000 pounds of forage. Okay, so she'll eat maybe almost 10,000 pounds of forage. So we're talking about almost 800 pounds of forage a month. Stockers are going to eat about 400 to 450 pounds of forage per month. And if you look at this particular pasture right here, you know, we're basically running at about 4,000 pounds of forage per acre. So if I grazed it to the ground, okay, I could run a stocker on it for, you know, roughly about 10 days. And so you have to think about, you know, how much forage do you have? How many cattle do you have? How many can you keep? And of course, it's always better to use some sort of a rotational system to allow grass to rest and regrow. And the real key to running stocker cattle on these types of forage programs, all right, is that you're going to run them for a long time. So you may run them for 2 or 3 months. And so you have to make sure that there's plenty of forage out there. You do not want to lizard lick this. You don't want it to look like this cow trail or this water lot trail that's going in here. You don't want it to be bare dirt. You want to utilize about half of what you see here, because you want that grass to regrow so the next time you get good rain, it has a good enough root system that it'll continue to maintain itself. So this is another example, and this is actually at my place. And so this is getting a little bit short. This is actually a lot of coastal Bermuda grass. This is before the drought. So this is another set of steers that were out there, and you see the sort of a mixed type. You don't see their muzzles. My old friend, Dr. Wayne Henselk, was our range specialist for 30-something years here in the Valley and in Corpus Christi, and we ran a lot together. And he would always say that you're grazing just about right if you can't see their muzzles. And that's absolutely true, what you see right here. This is a winter pasture. This is actually up the country quite a bit. This is actually a wheat field that was planted, wheat and rye, that was planted just south of Uvalde. And so typically this is a little bit different. Okay, this is actually cost quite a bit more to put in than what you would have in terms of your native grass like you see right here. But if you're lucky that you live in the valley, you don't get any hard freezes, and so you get grass growth year round, you can maintain cattle like that. As you get further north, go further north above Victoria, and it starts to get cold and you start to get freezes, then winter pasture is what you need to have. And so that's what they typically use. These pastures are much more highly digestible, much more higher in protein, okay, much more productive. but they don't all grow at once. And so some winter grasses grow early, some grow late. And if you plant them over your regular pastures, your coastal Bermuda grass pastures, along about March or April, you need to graze them pretty heavily. Otherwise, your coastal or your buffalo grass will get set back, okay? Because this will cover up those plants and they won't get any light. But pastures like this, you ought to be able to get 1 3/4 to almost 2 pounds a day in terms of gain, but they are also more costly. Supplementation. So here's some more stockers. So I think this is actually those Brangus females. This is a sort of a mineral feeder that I like to use. I like to use loose mineral, all right, so that I can get some consumption out of it. I've used mineral in a tub, but I have to realize it's a little bit more expensive. Typically, a sack of mineral will last a cow about 6 months, and so it'll last 2 stockers about 6 months. It'll last 4 stockers about 3 months. About 3 months. And so, you know, you figure that you're going to spend probably in the neighborhood of about $12 in mineral on these stockers. And it's important to have good mineral. They need to be able to consume it. You need to be able to protect it from being blown. I really recommend on native grass pastures, sort of like what you see here. This is actually a coastal mix at this time. I would recommend something like a 10 or 8%, or maybe even a 12, somewhere around there, 8 to 12% calcium and around an 8% phosphorus. So I could do a 10 or a 12% calcium, 8% phosphorus trace mineral. And I like a loose mineral. I don't like a block. And I'm sort of different than my colleagues. I like a white salt block in there, even though that mineral that you see in here has already got salt in it. I think sometimes stocker cattle just like salt. I'll put them in one of these troughs that you see over here. All right, and so it was sort of a dry winter like today. Obviously, it's better if it were covered, protected from the rain. But the reality of it is, you put that white salt block here. When they stick their head in this, they're going to lick that white salt. I want them to lick mineral. Okay, cows don't have nutritional wisdom. They don't know that mineral is good for them. I want them to investigate it. I might put a little cottonseed, or might put a little ground corn or ground grain sorghum on her, just a little bit to get them to thinking about that they might want to taste it, might want to try it. They don't need very much. About 2 ounces per head per day would pretty much supply all their nutrient needs. This is just a tub. I already told you about it. Now, I have nothing against tubs. Some of them have mineral in them, and that's fine. But just make sure that you're using that tub for a specific purpose. If you're seeing those cattle pretty much every day or every other day, and if you think that they need supplemental protein based on their fecal pads or on the condition of the pastures, then I would sack feed it. And there's a lot of good products that are out there: range cubes, cottonseed meal, even whole cottonseed. I fed tons and tons of whole cottonseed, because a little bit of additional protein, not much, 2/10 to 4/10 of a pound, so a couple of pounds of range cubes, a pound of cottonseed meal, 1 1/3 of a tub like this will improve forage digestibility about 30%, and will improve gains. You almost get a 1-to-1 improvement in gain by supplementing with about 4/10 of a pound of protein. What that means is, on dry grasses, dry forages, if they're short of protein and you feed about 4/10 of a pound of protein, you will increase average daily gain almost 4/10 of a pound. It only works that one time, though. Okay, you can't feed 8/10 of a pound of protein and get 8/10 of a pound of increased gain. So I just put out, these are those Brangus heifers at 2 different times in their life. Up here in the top, this is when they first came on board. This is after 90 days down here. So you see a change. Up here, we're feeding some whole cottonseed. All right, and I just sort of knocked those troughs together and they're set there on a concrete block. And down here, we're feeding some cottonseed cubes. Just because we called the cattle in, we were looking at them. These cattle were not implanted. They were all tagged. They were all vaccinated, blackleg, and 4-way respiratory, dewormed and deflied and identified, because they were going to go to a program that was going to breed them to Angus bulls. So we talked about improving performance all during this, and I just have these down: deworming, horn fly control, implanting. Remember that there's 2 different types. of implants, one for calf, less than 400 pounds, and then 2 different types of implants if you have steers or heifers. Unless you're absolutely sure that that heifer is going to go into a feed yard, I would not implant it. Because if you're planning on running that heifer back through a cell barn, we know that implants will will affect negatively reproduction. Some folks like to feed an ionophore, so there's a couple that are there, Rumensin and Bovatec. What an ionophore does, it shifts the manufacture of what are called volatile fatty acids, which are part of the energy content of forages as they're broken down by bacteria. They're very inexpensive. They have to be fed, obviously. I do want to point out that rumensin is toxic to monogastrics, okay? So like horses, it's also toxic to wild pigs, but that's not a reason to go feed it because it's very expensive. Bovatec is much safer. Both of them have the same effect, but again, they have to be fed daily. Maybe some sort of a self-limited feeder would work. And we already talked about minerals and protein in the summer. Facilities is good. This is my old place in Jim Wells County. I had a set of pens, and when the stockers came in, we could watch them and monitor them for a few days so we could doctor them. We had good pens that we could get the cattle up in, and that's very important because when you first wean those cattle and you keep them yourself, if you've never done that before, after you vaccinated for them, for about 2 weeks, some of them are going to get a little sick. And you need to be able to have some sort of a protocol, a herd health protocol with your veterinarian, hopefully, what to doctor with, how to recognize signs of illness, and to doctor those cattle. And then, of course, water. I don't recommend that you have cattle in the water trough, like water tank up there like you see there. I just took that picture. But cattle do need good, clean water. So wherever you have cattle, and this is a trough on my old place, I made sure that they had good, clean water. They prefer clean water, and they'll do better if the water is clean. They're going to drink about a gallon of clean water a day per 100 pounds of body weight. And so that's really important when you think about your calves. If you got 20 calves and they weigh 400 pounds each, that'll give you an idea that they're going to drink 800 gallons of water a day. And if you got more than that, you need to think about that. So you need to have plenty of good, clean water. We already visited a little bit about health management and recognizing that you need to have a good herd health program. And this is where your veterinarian comes in. You're blessed with having a lot of good veterinarians down in the valley, and I would certainly recommend that you get one involved, not only in your stocker herd health program, but in your cow herd health program. There are problems that you can have, and I just threw some up here. Up here in the top right-hand corner, you see a steer that's got his head caught in the Y of a tree. And right after I stopped and took that picture, I thought I was going to have to go get his head out, and he just lifted his head out and backed up, and he was gone. Over on the right-hand side, you got a calf with a broken leg. So if you've got cattle guards, if you're bringing somebody else's calves in, they may not realize that they can hurt themselves in a cattle guard. So we used to have to fix a couple of legs every now and then. We got that done successfully. Down here, this is Easter Sunday. I had a big steer, 750 pounds, that decided he was going to walk through the cattle guard and maybe eat some of this little bit longer grass on the other side. He didn't break any legs. All right, but that's just the kind of problem. Then, of course, because these cattle drink water and lots of it, you're always going to have water problems, water issues. And that was a cold winter day fixing a water line. So lastly, I just want to tell you that you need to think about what's going on in terms of the market. If you're holding your own calves, you need to know what they're going to bring today versus what they might bring next year. This year's been crazy. Everybody knows that. This black line is the trend line for the last 5 years. And I realize this is Oklahoma 400 to 500 pound steer price. All right, but we can pretty much say that this trend line is going to be the case in any auction barn sale that we see today. All right, so we always get more for our cattle in the springtime, which is why y'all are here, and less for them sometime here in late October when everybody's selling their weaned calves. And so the idea maybe is to hold these cattle here and then sell them over here. And I understand that. You probably won't see the wide pattern that you see here, because if you go back here, this is what 2020 is, and this is 2019. So you can see that early months in 2019, that's the blue line, they weren't nearly as good as they were just a few months later. So that's why it's going to be important to pay attention to the market. Okay. Know where the cattle are coming and where they're going and when they're going to go, what your cost of gain is. Help determine, you need to determine what the break-even price is. And most importantly, you need to know something about weather and grass conditions. And that's not fat, that's actually GRASS down there. So last slide, sort of like stock or economics, we already talked about knowing something about the value, okay? So right here, I did a little quick math, and don't hold me to it, but today, 500-pound feeders are worth about $1.25 a pound, maybe a little bit less where you are, maybe a little bit more. So on a 500-pound calf, that's at 625 bucks. And if you're going to hold them till April, okay, they're worth $1.10. Okay, that's the futures that 750 weight calves are going to be worth $1.10. As we get closer to April, we'll know whether that's right or not. We figure that they'll gain about a pound a day. Okay, and actually that's not 700 days. That's actually closer to about 150. All right, so I made a little math error here. So they'll weigh, instead of 700 pounds, they'll actually weigh about 650 pounds. Well, let's just say if they gained a little bit more, they'll weigh 700 pounds. However, when you sell those cattle, you have a little bit of a shrink, so they'll actually weigh about 679. And based on $1.10, they're going to be worth $7.47. So my point is that the difference between this number and this number, that $122, that $122 difference has to pay for your grass, because your grass is worth something, your preconditioning, your vaccines, your mineral. It has to pay for trucking. You're going to haul cattle to the sale barn. Medicine, any deads. Hopefully you won't have any, but I can guarantee you that you may have some sicks, and you could possibly have deads. And so all these things goes out of that $122. So you have to decide whether you have to put a pencil to it. You can pull these market reports at this website. And I just pulled the market report from today. And so you can kind of see how it reads. Here's steers, medium and large ones, 557 pounds are worth $1.40. Okay, so I backed them up a little bit at $1.25. Heifers, medium and large ones, were $1.26. So you can see that heifers are worth $14 or 14 cents less than steers. And then you have heifers, medium and large. All right, so that'll kind of give you an idea of what those cattle are worth. I'm going to stop right there. As I said, this was just sort of an overview of some thoughts to think about in terms of stocker, holding on some of your wean calves and keep them as stockers. The main thing is to put a value on them coming in right now, get an idea of what it's going to cost you to run those cattle, and then get a projection of what they're going to gain and what that gain is going to be worth when you decide to sell them. And realize that we're not just talking about January or February. We might actually be talking about holding these cattle until March or April. Good luck, and thank you so very much.